Welcome to the Safety Pro podcast. Today's guest is a special guest for the podcast, a longtime leader in workplace safety and health with more than 30 years of driving positive results and leading transformative change. He served as Vice President of Global Health and Safety at UPS, where he successfully implemented and led broad health, safety, and compliance initiatives, and later as Director of Global Transportation Safety at Amazon, implementing innovative road safety processes. A longstanding member of the National Safety Council and American Society of Safety Professionals, he is deeply committed to injury and accident prevention so that every worker can go home safe. He is a graduate of Sullivan University in Louisville, Kentucky, and was nominated by the President on February 11th, 2025, and confirmed by the U.S. Senate on October 2nd, 2025. Of course, I'm talking about none other than the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupational Safety and Health, Mr. David Keeling. David, how you doing?
Thanks, Blaine. That may be the best introduction I've ever had.
It was great. I wanted to read it like. I like that it wasn't too long because I'm more than 30 years. We could have probably gone into all kinds of stuff that you've done.
You summarized my 40-year career very well. Thank you for doing that.
If somebody did that to me in 30 seconds, my entire career, I would probably be depressed. I'm just kidding. So look, we wanted to get together. We've been talking about this since before you were even confirmed, I think, before December, maybe. Look, I've been on this path as a safety professional with this podcast since 2014 to, one, make sure that my profession is the best it can be. I'm very protective of my profession, but I'm also very critical of the things that we do or don't do within the safety profession. And one of the things I've been trying to do is sort of, I don't know, it sounds goofy, demystify, OSHA. And a lot of safety professionals, we don't interact with OSHA, some of them in their entire career. Unfortunately, I've assisted in 5 fatalities, the investigation of 5 workplace fatalities in my career, numerous inspections from client sites as a consultant. So I got real comfortable with OSHA, and even partnering with OSHA and the VPP with 13 different company sites, getting that STAR certification, or that STAR flag, I should say. So I want safety professionals to get to know OSHA, what OSHA's strategic direction might be at any given time, and just be able to talk to OSHA, if you will, in this case, David. So that's what we want to do. We just want to get to know a little bit more about OSHA, about the direction OSHA's headed, and hear it directly from the source. How's that sound?
Sure. That sounds great.
All right.
I appreciate your approach. I think demystify is a great way to frame it.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, right, that not everyone gets to interact from OSHA. And I'll explain why I believe interact with OSHA. I'll explain kind of why I believe that. For too many years, OSHA's been a 4-letter word, right? Walk in the door, and it's because of a bad situation, or it's something that we'd all prefer not to have occurred. And I think our opportunity is getting out there in front of that, right? It's when we get to a site or location after an event, it's already too late. So we need to find a way from a support and a collaboration perspective to get into doors earlier, to get information and get opportunities out there to employers earlier to engage, to really meet businesses, meet employers where they are. And I think we can do a lot better job of that. And one of the things I'll tell you is I think people ask me sometimes, what have you been surprised? I'm only 4 months in, but what have you been surprised so far when it comes to the job? I knew when I walked into this position, I would be walking in, working with the best of the best and some really great career people who are really committed to the job and have a passion for the job. I underestimated even that. They really want to make things better. And the last thing you'll hear them say is, a lot of times where we in the meeting is, I like this direction. I really don't want to be the policeman on the beat. That's not why I got into the job. right? I really want to make a difference in people's lives. I really want to make employers safer, and I really want to educate employers on how to do that. That's why I got in the job. I didn't get in this job as a co-show or as a frontline inspector to sit in the office 4 days a week and then go out when a fatality happened. I got in this job to really engage with employers and employees on a daily basis, and that's what I want to do to make them better. I knew that was there. I will tell you, I had underestimated that, even after 40 years in the organization, how dedicated this group is to that concept.
That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah. What parts of your professional background maybe shaped or helped you with how you approach workplace safety, or your outlook on the profession? Sort of like what you just said, they were shaped, I'm sure, along the way to get to this point as well. What about you?
At UPS for a number of years, the health and safety. When there was some opportunity there, because some back and forth that the organization had with OSHA at the time, and I was, to be frank with you, for the first couple of years, I was a safety cop, right? That's what I did, right? I went out I did inspections, I did reviews, and we put policies in place, and that's all we did, right? Um, and I didn't do a couple of other things that I think make us better in the long run, which I didn't do a very good job of convincing other people in the organization through building a business case that was the right thing to do for the business. So I would say traditionally we do a really good job at teaching safety professionals what the rules are, but we don't do a very good job, unfortunately, sometimes of explaining to them how and how to tell the why. There's a why for everything, right? A good example is you may have seen there's a new safety poster that went out recently from OSHA, mandatory posting, and it's a little different than what it's been in the past. And in the past, it's been referred to as law. Well, of
Yeah.
course, it's the law, right? I don't think I'm telling you anything they don't know. It's a law, right? But that's if you approach it from that perspective, that's just as bad as you're allowed to be, right? If you approach it from that's a low bar to hit, to just be compliant with the law. And really, the approach we want to take is a little different here. We want to tell people why. We want to explain to people why. The fact that you can build a business case and show that employees being safe underscores the bottom line for the organization. It can be a competitive advantage. It can be something that an organization can take and raise up and hold up as a differentiator between them and competitors. And it's the right thing to do from a personal perspective with our employees as well. So we want to approach it from we don't want to be a singular organization. We're certainly an enforcement agency. We'll remain an enforcement agency. But if all we do is enforce, we're missing a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the old, I'm going to say the old days, the three-pronged approach, right? That it was enforcement, it was outreach, and education. And those other two prongs are important. I love that too. I definitely subscribe to that notion. My frustration within my profession has always been something similar, which is, we can't just say, hey, here's a rule, here's a policy, you have to follow it, no matter what, and this is all we're going to do. When as a safety professional inside an organization, one, we can meet a minimum standard many different ways. It's a lot of times they're performance driven, or we get to determine how we're going to achieve that compliance, right? What means and methods. And so I think as a safety professional, we have an opportunity to do just what you said, make that business case, connect safety to how it supports the goal the business has at the end of the day. The business exists for a reason. I mean, we're not packaging safety and shipping it to a customer, right? It exists, and we should celebrate that. That's okay that a business exists to produce something. Safety is a tool that we can use to make sure it's done efficiently, effectively, with cost in mind, productively, in a repeatable process. And it has this added benefit that some of the other areas of the business, like maybe quality, doesn't have. And it's an employee benefit. it can be seen as an employee benefit, just like our health insurance benefits. You come here, we strive to take care of you so that you can keep coming here and doing this.
Absolutely.
And so I think you're right. We really can do. I know you were speaking on in terms of the administration, but I'm speaking in terms of our safety profession at large. We could all do a lot better with that. So that I agree with you 100% on that one. What about any leadership lessons that you learned along the way? I get asked this a lot from
Yeah.
safety professionals about, hey, what helped shape you? Or usually they ask, why I started a podcast, because it's kind of crazy, but it's usually something around a moment in their career, and maybe not a catastrophe, but just like a mentor they had, or something that kind of flipped that switch for you. Was there any kind of leadership lesson you learned along the way that still influences you today?
Yeah, I was lucky, and early in my career, I had a few great mentors. I'll mention a couple names, but Alexi Carley, I worked for at UPS for a
Oh,
number of years, learned a lot from Alexi. Um, a few of the things is you don't necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, if you are, right, the old adage, if you're the smartest person in the room, find a new room. Luckily here at OSHA, that's not a
you're in the
problem
wrong
for
room.
me, right? I'm rarely the smartest person in the room, which is fine, right? And that makes us better.
Yeah.
So I think don't be afraid to ask more questions. A good leader asks more questions than they give answers a lot of times. I think the other thing is the further we get away from the job, and I was talking to one of the things that I've done is make sure that I've connected early on with some of the co-shows and some of the inspectors that are out boots on ground to see how things are going, and where we can improve, right, and where we have pinch points. And again, I hear them over and over again. I've got to find a way to get out and engage with employers and employees more. That's one of the things. But I think what it underscores is the further we get away from the job as it's being done, the less we know. Even if we used to do the job years ago, it's changed.
Yeah.
Job is rarely, and the way you do a job, the process rarely stays stagnant. So engaging with frontline workers, and don't assume right? Ask
Yeah.
questions and engage frontline workers. And then again, I think from a leadership perspective, understanding the business that you're in, understanding what the goals of the business are. Nails on a chalkboard to me is when we start talking about, and I used to do it, right? I'll throw myself under the bus. We used to talk about a standalone safety culture. I'm not a believer in that.
Yes.
And I know I've followed your podcast, so I know I've had these conversations before on your podcast. So I'm a big believer that you can ingrain safety into the organizational culture, but in the end, the organizational culture is going to win, right?
Yes.
So you have to find your way to win within that culture, and every organization has their own. So I think that's for me. That's the thing is how do I engage with the business in a way that the business understands? How do I engage the frontline workers in a way that is beneficial for them? And don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's the biggest thing. And don't believe you have all the answers because we never do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no need to ask a question if you already think you have the answer, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. So, speaking of, continuing down this path of, the perspective of the administration, let's talk a little more technical then. And the one question I had written down here that I really want to get, and this was a question, by the way, I threw a call out to some of my colleagues and said, hey, if you could ask one thing, what would you ask? And I've got, have you seen the aliens, where the aliens are? But we won't. I said, no, that's a different government official. We're not going to ask him that. So that was
The
one
answer is
question.
no, but okay.
No. So the, what trends are you, and this is a great one, what trends are you watching most closely right now? Is whether it's hazards, industries, workforce changes and technology and how we need to adapt, but what trends are you focusing on or seeing right now that need to be
Yeah.
focused on?
I think there's a number of things that we need to look at. I think from a industry's perspective, I think from a safety perspective, you're seeing that turn to serious injury and fatality. The SIF conversation. I think that's an opportunity for OSHA. We've looked at it again a little differently in the past when it comes to how we look at compliance, right? And again, missed opportunities, if that's the extent of what we engage in, is simply rule breaking, right? Or citations, right? I desperately care about the number of inspections that we do, because that's interactions with employers and employees. I'll be less concentrated on the number of citations and fines we give, right? That's not to say we're not going to handle bad employers or problem employers. We're going to do that, and we're an enforcement agency. At the same time, though, I think we have a responsibility to the country and to the president and Secretary DeReamer to do the best we can at engaging employers and meeting them where they are. So not every employer, especially when you talk about, and another trend we can talk about besides this is where's that driven in, right? I think small and medium-sized businesses, if you look at the numbers, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know and your audience doesn't know, but if you look at the numbers, there's been an outside growth in small and medium-sized business, serious injuries, and injuries in general. So we need to be more conscious of the fact that we have to meet businesses where they are in their journey. That's one thing that we're looking at doing. I know, we may have an opportunity later on to talk about modernization and VPP, or some of the things that we're doing right now is really intended to get further into small, medium-sized businesses, maybe those organizations who don't have the resources, quite frankly, to go a VPP route. I know you've been deeply involved in VPP in the past. It's a great program, but how can we make that more accessible for employers where it's appropriate, and where it's not appropriate, what other avenues can we give employers and employees to engage? So that's one thing, is small and medium-sized businesses, and we need to do it, along with it's right in line with the president's take from an economic perspective, right? With how we want to do that and grow the economy. But it's the right thing to do from an employee perspective as well, because that's where the events are occurring.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of us, we get into hedgehog mode. We don't even see outside our four walls. And I tell the story all the time. My wife and I owned a couple of franchise frozen yogurt shops many years ago. And we always talked in terms of four walls, 4 blocks, 4 miles. See how, one, you got to control the business side, the back of house, the front of house, the experience the customer has when they come in. Do you have inventory under control? Is it clean? Do you have a maintenance schedule? Your 4 walls, 4 blocks. Where are we located? What are our neighbors like? Do we connect with them and make sure that we are aligned with what our neighbors are doing? And then 4 miles, how are we reaching into the communities, and how do we impact the community at large? I think as safety professionals, I've always carried that lesson with me. Maybe it's not literally 4 miles or 4 blocks, but it's sort of this hot, warm, cold zone type of approach. We don't think that big in as a safety professional when we're talking about GDP and how, as a country, we're competitive in the business landscape. And safety in our small part, that our small part, but can be a big lever to pull to be competitive and to
It's
increase
a competitive
jobs.
advantage if done correctly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm glad
one
you
of the other
brought that
trends
up.
that I know you'd asked about trends. One of the other trends is AI, and I'll tell you my kind of my spill on that real quick. Right, is I'm not afraid of AI. I love the fact that we've got new tools coming into the industry. It helps make us better, right? It helps make us smarter, and it helps cut down time that we need to get to an answer. And if we use it correctly, I used the analogy the other day with a group I was talking with that, not quite as many people, we still make candles, but not quite as many people make candles for light, right? to light up a room. Not as many people shoe horses as used to shoe horses. And we need to think of it better in that time, in that framework, that we have a tool here, and we need to get ahead of it, and we need to be out ahead of it. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to make our inspectors better, to make our inspections better. And it's a tremendous opportunity for us to leave something with employers when we go. One of the things I used to do, and I think, it was kind of underscored with me. You mentioned some of the folks I'd learned from over the years, was always find the opportunity to get better. Even if you're doing well, find an opportunity to get better. Always be constructively dissatisfied. I'll use that term. And one of the things I used to ask safety managers or supervisors that work with me or worked for me is, we'd invariably have OSHA come in the door, the EPA come in the door, FAA come in the door, the DOT, whoever it might be, for an inspection, and or maybe not been a local agency, but come in and left. And what did we learn was always my question. And invariably what we heard back was no citations, no fines, we're doing great. That's really not what we asked, right? What we ask is, what did we learn? What can we do better? So I think one of the things that we're going to look at doing from an OSHA perspective is leaving something with every interaction. And it's something really, I will tell you again that I will tell you the career folks, especially those in the regions and the area offices and those on the front line, really embrace this early on. And they do it already, right? You've been involved with OSHA before, and they come in and say, well, it's not a legal issue here, but here's some opportunities or here's some things that we might be able to do better to reduce the risk associated with this job. Yep. We've seen OSHA do that over the years. We want to formalize that a little more and leave something with businesses so that they can improve, even if they're doing well. What's our opportunity for improvement? So I think AI can play a big part of that. Can help us determine beyond what our legal obligations are, what's a good risk analysis or risk assessment, and here it is, and here's how we can get better.
Yeah, I do. I agree. The medium and small size businesses, I think the expertise and the technical expertise is where they lack. With these tools can help, democratize or increase access, I should say, to some of those expert tools and how to do those things. What we need to fix is usually not the problem. How do we do it is usually where we kind of get stuck, because there could be a number of different ways to do that. So I was going to ask you, and you kind of led right into it, some of the biggest challenges facing not just businesses, but what about OSHA? How do you see the administration tackling things like whether it's AI or emerging industries we didn't have before? I remember we didn't have software programmers. I'm old enough to remember we didn't have the internet. So those are new jobs. Those are whole new industries that we didn't regulate before.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that again, some things you track when you're going into a new position, some things you maybe don't track as closely. OSHA had been under hiring freeze for about 3 years. And one of the things I didn't track right as well as I probably should have is the effect that had. Obviously we had some cuts in addition to that, but the vast majority of boots on ground was actually lost in previous years. And we lost a lot of skill with that. But rather than looking, I think our region and area directors are doing a really nice job of this, looking at this, and we've talked a lot about it, as an opportunity now to bring staff in that have that skill set, right? So when we've actually, shameless plug here, we put out a job call. We've opened up about 108 positions. Great response so far. Far more applicants than we have spots for, unfortunately, but just in the first day or two. So. But we're looking for that skill set, right? It's maybe a little different than the traditional skill set. So the ability to do risk assessments, not just understand what the legal obligations are, but how do you do a risk assessment? How do you leave something with an organization? Where are you with your understanding of AI and technology from that perspective? We're looking at industrial hygiene skill set. We're looking at a safety engineer skill set. So we're looking at it a little different than maybe we have in the past. That's one challenge, but I think it's also an opportunity. I think with every challenge comes an opportunity. That's one of the things. And I think the other, and we've already touched on it a little bit, but the other opportunity is to, I don't know that I would sit here and say, as somebody who's been in the industry for 40 years, that OSHA has always been on the leading edge of safety. That's a shame, right? We ought to be providing leadership from an administration perspective, and I think the administration is doing that now. But from an OSHA perspective, as part of the administration, we need to be doing that. We've kind of been trailing a lot of times. So I think when we talk about things like SIF and how we incorporate that in, right? Proactive risk assessments, using AI and using technology more effectively. One of the things we're doing, I know you're longtime members of quite a few organizations out there, but VPPA, National Safety Council, ASSP, AAHA, I could go on and on with different groups that we're engaging with, that we want to be we want to be at the table with those groups. We want to be in the front of the conversation with them. We want to be a leader in the space, not a trailer. And we don't just want to be an enforcement arm. We don't want to be just in the enforcement business. We want to be in the abatement business. How do we get better?
Good. That's great. You mentioned VPP a couple of times now. It's my probably, I mean, it's near and dear to me. I've worked so much with that program and with employers.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's even it was a handful, just shy of a dozen companies that initially said they had no intention of applying for VPP star status, but they wanted to use the VPP, the CSP, for a benchmark. Like, this is what some of the best performing when it comes to safety companies are doing. We want to sort of use that as a benchmark. And lo and behold, they ended up going, hey, wait, we can do this. We can
Right.
apply, and they've got their flag now. And I think it's a great program, and it's probably, and I'm not just saying that, I've got episodes going back years where I did a whole series of episodes on each of the four elements of VPP. I had to have been 5-6 years ago. Look, probably one of the best things I think OSHA adopted, and it came from industry. I believe electrical power generation company, maybe a utilities company out of California. But yeah, that's a great example of how OSHA is sort of saying, hey, this is something that the industry is doing that makes sense. How can we be a part of that? And so I would love to see more of the administration doing that, partnering with, we're all in it together. And
Right. Absolutely. We're on,
yeah,
we didn't remember that. We are on. We might want to get, we might find different roads to get there sometimes, but we all want to get to the same location, right? To the
yeah,
same destination. So yeah, one of the things that we're doing with VPP, and I would agree with you, it's a phenomenal program. We do want to expand that, both access to VPP, but also maybe companies we talked about earlier, and you may find a company who says, look, I want to aspire to that, but I'm just not there yet. I'm not there in resources. I'm not there in time. You may have seen we rolled out recently Safety Champions. That
yeah.
is intended, that's actually targeted for companies that either are not there, maybe they do have the size, but they're not quite there yet in their journey, but small, medium-sized companies who quite frankly don't have the resources, right? And we're adding quite a few, I'll call them safety mentors, especially government employees, but we've added, I think we trained up, the last batch was over 300 safety mentors, right? And that's just
Oh,
recently in the
and
last
these
couple
are
of weeks.
SGEs then.
They're SGEs,
Okay,
and they perform the same way that you
nice.
did when you were in helping
Right.
with the VPP, right? I'm going to refer to them as safety mentors just because SGEs has a lot of different terminology in the
Yeah.
government, right? So I'm going to use the safety mentor word on that,
Great.
or reference on that. But we want to use those folks, right? And we're looking right now at ways that we can incent people to join that safety mentor program as mentors. And we've had great, we had our first, actually yesterday on Tuesday, we had our first phone call with people that were interested, first WebEx with people that were interested in Safety Champions. We've got another one, another shameless plug tomorrow afternoon at 2:00 Eastern time. Safety Champions. So yeah, we want to encourage people to engage in that. And it's not, everybody's not in the same place. And we need to recognize that not everybody's in the same place. And we need to help them get to where they need to be.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, and I had a whole section here on VPP, but I think that covered that whole section. We just got there naturally. I see. This is why, and Dave, I don't use scripts. I don't have, but for this, I wanted to make sure I got the questions from some of my colleagues down and
I
everything. But
can't stay on them when I do use them. So
having a conversation, just sometimes you'll get there naturally. So, which is great. So I did have a question that was on here, and it was right after a VPP question, but what does good faith look like from OSHA's perspective in 2026 and beyond?
yeah,
Good faith.
that's a
That comes up
great
a lot.
question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. And I'm answering that not as an attorney because I'm not an attorney. I'm going to answer it as a safety professional. Okay. Good faith. I truly believe, and we can argue about the percentages, whether it's, and people will have different, depending on what industry they're in and their experience and the background, they're going to have different thoughts on this.
Mhm.
You can say it's a 90-10. You could say it's a 95-5. I will say it's even less than that. It's probably along the line of a 98-2, right? People that want to do the right thing for the right reason simply don't know how or haven't had the opportunity, right? And we need to get engaged with those employers to get them where they need to be. Now, again, I will tell you that for those 2%, 5%, we can argue about the percentages, right? As safety professionals, but for those who simply won't do the right thing or have no intention of doing the right thing, where we're finding incidents of willful or potentially criminal neglect, we're going to deal with that. And we're going to deal with that as we should, harshly. So no change on that, no change in that approach. And I think you'll find, I'm again not an attorney, but I think you'll find us in lockstep with the solicitor's office at the Labor Department and Justice Department and how we're going to approach those things. Now, having said that, I'm a very bad golfer. I will tell you, I'm a terrible golfer, right? It's one of the reasons I came back to work. My wife said, you need to go back to work because I've seen your scores and you just need to go back to work. So if you play, for those of you who play golf or have played golf, you got a lot of clubs in the bag, right? For me, compliance is like a sand wedge. We found ourselves in some place we don't want to be. We got to get the ball out of there. And it may take for me, it may take 2 or 3 whacks to get it out of the sand, right? But that's why the club's in the bag. But there are a lot of other clubs in the bag, right? And we at OSHA haven't necessarily been taking advantage of all the clubs in the bag in the past. So bad faith for me is people stuck in that sand wedge, and we're going to get them out one way or the other, right? But it's a smaller percentage of the employers, and we need to deal with, and unfortunately, it's that old 80-20 concept, right? Where you're going to put a lot more of your resources at a fewer part of the problem, part of the employment group. So that's kind of where I'm at with that term.
Wow. Yeah, that you're right. I think the other clubs, if we use them right, should keep us out of the sand.
I don't want to hit the ball in the sand. No one does, right?
Let's not do that at all. Yeah, if we can.
Yeah, let's stay out of the sand.
I am like you. I don't even bother with a bunch of clubs. I have like 3 that I'll take. I'm that bad. So it's terrible. Mostly it's the time, I think. It's a great analogy. So I like it. So what about, let's say we talked about VPP, but it could be any program. It doesn't even have to be a program. It's just an organization that wants to get better, and maybe we call back to the Safety Champions program, something like that. But your advice to an organization that wants to strengthen their safety management system, they want to get better, whatever that means. Is that the direction the Safety Champions program would go into, is to say, hey, we can partner you up with a mentor site. They've been there, done that. They're succeeding. They could share some of that.
It is. And I think for those folks, and I understand, and understand, I sat on the other side of the table for a few years from OSHA. So I understand that thought process that, I'm a little tentative or a little bit afraid of engaging with OSHA. The trust factor just isn't quite there yet, right? So, this gives those groups an opportunity to engage, and we're facilitating it, but we're not directly necessarily engaged. Now, we do have on-site consultations. We want to change the perception of some of those as well. We do have it walled off. I know people don't believe that between enforcement and I think you're going to see some more engagement from us on how we wall that off. So that people are a little more comfortable engaged on site. But yeah, Safety Champions and VPP is a great process, right? To follow, that you're not quite comfortable yet, or you're a little embarrassed maybe about where you stand, because maybe I don't, small, medium-sized employer, I don't have a safety program right now. Maybe I have a few best practices, but I don't have anything for them. And this is a way to build that out, right? When we know there's a lot of companies in that situation out there. This is a great way to build that out in a way that's cost effective, and you're taking advantage of best practices from around the industry.
Yeah, I call it safety R&D, rip off and duplicate. Like,
there we go.
It's no big secret. Yeah, it's not a big secret. We're all it's not like we have some sort of corner on approaching a hazard in a particular way. If it works, then why not try it? And
And I will
all
tell
right,
you,
so
we'll talk about safety mentors again. Great
yeah.
relationship with one of my counterparts when I was in transportation, Scott Mugno, who was at
Oh,
FedEx for a number of years. And I will tell you, we talked on a regular basis about issues and problems we were having. Now, this is FedEx and UPS at the time, right? But we shared shamelessly
yeah,
best practices, and I think it made us both better.
yeah. I mean, we've got folks on the road. Man, there's a whole, I've got it on my list of things to do, which is reach out to the Department of Transportation. I mean, that is a huge. I mean, if you think about, like, we look at a company that makes and produces things inside, again, four walls. That stuff's materials coming into the company, product and materials are going out of the company. Like, it's moving across the country somehow. Those are all workers as well. So
Right. Yeah. I
it's
want to
weird we
throw a
forget
number out
about
at
that.
you. So we all
Yeah,
know the BLS numbers came out recently.
yeah,
And the number of fatalities that were reported, you may remember, were about, I think it was 5,070
what? Yeah,
fatalities in the BLS. Now, if I back up for a second, and we did this, went back in and looked at these numbers the next day. And if you look at the number of fatalities that were directly associated with compliance activities that OSHA would oversee, we were under 800. So when you start looking at things like businesses that are under 20, right?
hmm,
Maybe don't have that OSHA interaction. When you start looking at things like transportation, certainly
right.
the DOT's oversight, right, from a transportation perspective. But the number one driver right now from a workplace loss perspective, from a fatality perspective, is transportation.
Yeah,
So I'm not comfortable. I can't live or play in a space where OSHA is going to go after 800 fatalities and not 5,070.
right.
Even though our regulatory oversight, right, understanding our regulatory oversight extends to that smaller batch, that smaller number, our
Hmm.
opportunity, right, the people we have to affect is over 5,000. And I think
Yeah,
that's a different way we're trying to look at that a little differently. And that's really driving some of our conversations with getting ahead of prevention, safety prevention, how we're engaging with employers, maybe non-traditionally. We can't do it with just enforcement and traditional enforcement methods.
and is to that end, is there? I don't want to say a plan, but is it a strategic approach to also partner with these other agencies? That sort of these, you're all on the same road, just different
Right.
lanes, to invoke a DOT reference. But for example, Department of Transportation, you have mining, you have MSHA. There is a lot of overlap. You'll have OSHA in a building, in a facility, looking at something, and they're also in the transportation business, and so that
I can tell
company
you, we have weekly
has to
engagement with
be
the
both.
mining team.
Yeah.
Weekly engagement with the mining team, and we
Okay.
we are having. I can't speak to what it's looked like historically as much, but I will tell you, we're going to have regular interactions with the DOT and EPA, some of those other groups.
Good.
Yes, the short answer to that is absolutely. We need to
Okay.
take advantage of each other's strengths,
Yeah.
and we need to support one another.
Right.
I think that's something that Secretary DeRemer and the president, right, have really pushed this administration to do. But we're in the same room on Mondays, every Monday, and there's conversations going on constantly. So yeah, we need to
Nice.
take advantage of each other, maybe more aggressively than we have in the past, and each other's strengths.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. All right. So, look, I want to thank you for the time we've spent today. I know you're super busy, and it's not easy to sit down and do some of this stuff sometimes, but I definitely wanted to, from very selfishly, by the way, for my profession, I want to try to break down that the myth of the mystique of OSHA, or the fear of talking with OSHA or dealing with OSHA. I've
Somebody asked me,
yeah.
yeah,
So what?
somebody asked me the other day, what does success look like at the end of the day? And
Yeah.
I know the participants here may be muted, but I'll hear the laughter right down Pennsylvania Avenue. If we could walk up to the door and they open the door and say, "OSHA, finally, it's about time you got here." Right? If we can ever get to that point, if we could, I know I'm living in Shangri-La right there, right? But we really want to move that direction.
Yeah.
We want to be part of the solution.
Yeah. My first interaction with OSHA was official interaction with OSHA was after a fatality, and Scott, I won't name his full name, but he helped that organization through that process. Was to say he was professional is almost an insult. He was a human being. He helped. He recognized what had happened to that company, and the impact that it had emotionally on that company. And I talked to him and stayed connected with him for years. I went and did some speaking stuff, invited him to speak at the company's safety conference that they had 3 years later. He came and spoke. Like that. That's what that was my experience. Has always been with OSHA. It's never been adversarial. So I appreciate you helping me sort of demystify OSHA a little bit here. And last question, I wanted to ask you: what do you hope? That's my hope. What do you hope safety professionals take away from today's conversation?
Uh, and all in all candid seriousness, we're here to help. We want to be part of the solution. We don't want to be part of the problem. We don't ever want to be seen as part of the problem. So we want to engage early. We want to engage often. We want to be seen as a partner in a process, and we're here to help. And I mean that in as much sincerity as I can muster. We want to hear success stories. We want to hear, and I think what you just said a minute ago is a great example. It's a great example of a success story that we can tell to convince other businesses, other organizations that we do want to change the narrative, and we want to be part of the solution. We want to be in the abatement and improvement business.
That's great. I love it. All right. Thanks again, David Keeling, Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupational Safety and Health. I really appreciate your time, and we should do this again soon. Anytime. It's an open invite.
She'll kill me later, but I'm gonna offer up Amanda Lehau is your next person. So I'll go leave the office before she finds me. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.